Good morning, everyone. I think we're having a little bit of a slow start with maybe the weather's affecting some technical stuff. So women are all just coming in. Thank you for renaming and staying muted. And if you need anything with help with Zoom or technology this morning, please send a message to Alex Rada or your small group leader, and we'll do our best to get you set up. So last week, if you were with us, we learned from Shoji Bolt about teens and boundaries. Some good stuff there that we can all use, especially with our topic today. Today, we're very excited to have Jackie Bruton with us live from Atlanta, Georgia. And we know there's a lot going on in Atlanta this morning too, as they're struggling through some pain and some heartache as they navigate what's been happening there. So be praying for Atlanta and be praying for Jackie as well. If you were with us in our third week of this semester, you remember we were blessed to watch a recorded video of a talk with Jackie that she did for an organization called Access. And it's worth celebrating again that God used Jackie to make that all possible, to get us permission to use that video. And that encounter led to connecting with Jackie about our class, and the Holy Spirit moved her to be with us live today. So we're very, very grateful. She's a busy woman. But Jackie is an international speaker. She's an author. She's a teen mentor. She teaches guys, girls, and parents healthy relationship skills in classrooms and school assemblies, at conferences, at churches around the country, and actually around the world. On her website, I love this. We're going to share her website later when I email you guys after class. But she says, I empower teens to dream bigger dreams, make better decisions, and fulfill brighter destinies. I also equip parents to have the tough conversations with their teens about love, sex, and relationships. I've always felt a calling and obligation to let youth know that they can beat any odds they may encounter. I truly believe where children end up as adults has much more to do with the things they can control rather than the things they can't control. So I share this powerful message with the youth. Your choices matter. And the same goes for us too. Our choices matter. So Jackie, we are so excited you're here and so grateful knowing your speaking schedule has ramped up in the last few weeks, and that you're joining us now, right, coming from another meeting this morning. So moms, you might remember too, we gathered all the questions that you all sent in and sent those to Jackie. She's going to answer as many as she can today, and she's going to suggest some ways that we can learn more about areas that she doesn't have time or capacity to address. But to get us settled and prepare to focus our hearts and minds to receive whatever God wants us to hear, as Jackie talks today, I'm going to surrender our time to the Lord and pray over us and over her and our small groups. So would you pray along with me as I pray? We're going to go to God now. Take a deep breath. Gracious God, we acknowledge that you're with us right this very second, wherever we're sitting. We know some of us are in Illinois and some of us are around the country, like Jackie and some of our moms even. We know that you're with us however we're showing up today. We breathe in your presence, Lord, and breathe out anything that's occupying our minds, anything that's distracting us. Please settle us. Please open us. Please focus our hearts, focus our minds, focus our eyes and ears to you so we can learn more about who you are, who you made us to be, and how we can love and lead our kids well. Please protect us, God, from the attacks of the evil one who tries to distract us with fear, with shame, with lies about who you are, about who we are, who our kids are. Please keep us focused on you so we can have hope, God. Thank you, God, for bringing Jackie to us today to teach us and encourage us and challenge us to grow ourselves and in our relationship with our kids. Please bless Jackie as you use her to bless us and our families. Thank you for the gift of this space and time together with our Moms with Teen Sisters. God, please give us tender courage to listen, respond, and glorify you with whatever we learn, whatever we share. We praise you, God, and ask all of this in faith through the powerful name of our Redeemer, your Son, Jesus. Amen. So moms, would you please join me in welcoming Jackie in our Zoom chat? Thank her for all her prayer and time and effort in showing up to serve us. So excited to have you, Jackie. I don't see you, but I know you're here.
No,
So,
I'm here, but
oh, there you are.
it did change my name. Thank you. It said Laura Knox. And let me explain to you why my name said
Well,
Laura.
Alex is saying, who is this? Okay.
No, I was speaking for a school and we were testing the equipment and like she had a free account. Laura had a free account. And it about 30 minutes in, it said your account's this is going to end in 10 minutes because you have a free account. And her purse was in the car. So I said, okay, Laura, I said, I'll go in and make this a paid account for you. And I forgot to take her information. So when it popped up and I was like, oh my God, Laura Knox's name is still showing up there. So I appreciate it. Whoever changed it for me, I appreciate you for changing it.
That was Alex. Okay, you've got the floor. Go ahead, Jackie.
Thank you, y'all. I am so excited about being here, and what an amazing group that y'all have. Okay, I'm from the South, so you're gonna hear me say y'all a lot. Sorry about that. My friend who lives in Cincinnati, she's like, why do you say y'all so much? And I'm like, I grew up saying y'all, okay? Shoot me. But anyway, such an amazing group. And I just believe it's a God thing that when Kathy reached out to me and, was trying to get approval to show the video. And I think I was somewhere out in my car when in a parking lot when I saw the text, and I was like, give me a call. And we talked for like an hour. And then God just laid it on my heart at 4:30 the next morning to offer to come and talk after y'all watch the video. And so she sent me the questions, and there are a ton of questions. And I know that there's no way that I will have time to answer all the questions. And Kathy, would you please let me know when I'm 10 minutes before I'm out of time so I can make sure I'm answering the ones that the questions that I think are probably the most pressing?
Yes, we'll do.
Thank you. So let me just tell you a little bit about me and what I do and how I so believe this is so much more of God and not me at all, because I am amazed at the response that I get from kids. So I have been for 19 years now, I have been going into middle and high schools in the Metro Atlanta area and talking to middle and high school students about love, sex, and relationships. And I go into health classes, and I'm there for 3 hours. So high school classes are 90 minutes. I'm there for 2 days. Middle school classes are an hour. So I'm there for 3 days. And so that's a lot of time that I have with kids. I've received over 17,000 letters from teenagers over that time. And I read the letters and I'm like blown away. I'm like, God, this is such a God thing, because I am definitely not smart enough, cool enough to get the response that I get. And it's so funny because the kids will often say, we wish you were our teacher all the time. And I'm like, trust me, if I taught you every day, you wouldn't like me either. I said, I get to come in for 3 hours. We talk about sex. I don't know your parents, so I'm not going to tell anybody anything that you say. I don't give you a grade. And did I say we talk about sex? I said, so what's not to like about that? And so I understand that I am in a position that like moms may not be in. Like they'll say, I feel like I can trust you. I feel like I was just talking to another teen my age. And it's been a long time since I've been a teenager, but it's just been such a God thing. And so one of the questions somebody asked was, I think it was, and I know these questions were not in order of importance, but just going down the list, it was the first one. And it said, do teenagers really think about their future family, kids, and spouse? We were skeptical hearing that. And you know what? I don't think they do until they're told that they should, if that makes sense. And so I do believe kids can be selfish. But when I talk to them about, what do you want for your kids? And I say selfish is when you make a decision that benefits you, even though it hurts somebody else. And so when you tell me it's my body, I'm not hurting anybody, I can do what I want to do, but yet your choice could be bringing another child into the world in a time when you're not prepared, like that would be selfish. So then I started getting these letters from kids saying, I want to be selfless. I don't want to be selfish. And it's almost like at the beginning of every school year, like God gives me another angle to approach it with the kids. But I also believe one of the reasons why I have been more effective than I even imagined is, number one, I'm not their parent, but I come in and I kind of disarm like all of their arguments from the beginning. And so I come in and say, I'm not here to make your choices for you. I say, this is the other thing that I tell them. I'll say, you know what? There are a lot of adults who tell me that I'm wasting my time because they say you're going to do it anyway. And that's true. Like there are a lot of people who want me to go in and teach safe sex and not to teach them why not to have sex. And I said, because they say with everything that's out there in the media that's screaming sex at you, that they don't believe you have enough discipline and self-control to not have sex. And then you know what I'll often hear? They'll say, just because they couldn't do it doesn't mean we can't do it. And it's this whole thing of being challenged. And it's like they want to prove somebody wrong. And I'll say, you know what? If I taught you the way a lot of adults want me to teach you, which is just to come in and teach you how to put condoms on a banana and talk to you about all the forms of birth control. I said, if I taught you that way, I said, I could run into one of you out in the community 20 years from now. And a young lady could say, Miss Jackie, I was in your class 20 years ago at that high school, and I did everything you told me to do. I took birth control. I insisted that the guy used a condom every time I had sex, and I still got cervical cancer. I say, because that's possible. And then I talk about the fact that cervical cancer is caused by HPV, which is an STD that's spread by skin to skin contact. And even if the guy has on 100 condoms, you're still at risk of getting it because the condom doesn't cover the entire genitals. And then I'll say, guys, you're not going to get cervical cancer because you don't have a cervix. I had one guy in the class, he said, where's my cervix? And I'm like, we got bigger problems. If you think you have a cervix, we have bigger problems. I say, but I could run into one of you and say, you would tell me, Miss Jackie, I was in your class 20 years ago at McEachern High School. I did everything you said to do. I never had sex without a condom, and I still got herpes. I said, because that's possible. I said, because herpes is also spread by skin to skin contact. And so even if you have the safest sex you could ever have, you're still at risk of having a consequence. And I say, the way I teach, my conscience will be clear. Because if I run into any of you out in the community and you say to me that you ended up with a consequence because you had sex, I said, the only thing you can say to me is, I knew better, I just didn't do better. And I said, that's on you. That's not on me. And then I'll say, but I think the only reason why any young person would make a decision that can only give you temporary pleasure, when that very same decision could keep you from becoming all that you could be, is because you can't know who you are. And I say, because if you really knew who you were, if you really knew what your purpose was in life, if you really had an identity of why you were on this earth, there is absolutely no way that you would allow anything that only gives you temporary pleasure, but yet that very same thing could keep you becoming all that you can be, you wouldn't do it. And so when I start out like that, it's like I kind of disarm the argument of this woman is just trying to keep us from having fun. And they always say, we can tell that you care about us. And the other thing I tell them, I say, if the only thing that you hear during the time that you hear me speak is that you shouldn't have sex, then I didn't do my job. I say, because this is so much bigger than sex for me. This is about helping you live up to your fullest potential. And I say, because even if you die a virgin and you don't live up to your fullest potential, that's still a tragedy. And so when I go in that way, and that's how I start, it changes the whole atmosphere in the room. Because they don't see me as this adult woman that's coming in and just telling us. And I always also sympathize with them about, everything that's out there in the culture. Like, it is going to be difficult. And I say, it would be tough not to have sex. I said, you're dealing with so much more than I am. And than I did when I was a teenager. I said, but let me tell you something. If you don't make that tough choice to not have sex, you may be faced with an even tougher choice. I say, because which choice do you think is tougher? The choice not to have sex, or the choice to figure out what to do once you find out a pregnancy has happened? The choice not to have sex, or the choice to figure out what you want to do because you got an STD? And I say, I'm not saying it would be easy. Oh, it would be so difficult. But if you don't make the first tough choice, there will be an even tougher choice down the road, possibly. And the thing that started amazing me is I have had teachers in my class who have started crying in my class. And I printed out something, because this was a teacher that sent me a letter after I left. And she said, I love the way you approach this topic and present the message. It is about so much more than just sex, and a message that is universal regardless of age. I am 40 years old and recently divorced. When you talked about loving yourself and not settling for less than you deserve, it hit home for me. Even though I thought I had high standards, listening to you speak made me realize I really don't. I text my girlfriend throughout your presentation to share what you were saying because she is in a similar situation in her relationship. And I told her that we both can do better than what we're settling for. And so when you have an adult, I mean, the teachers who I can see them crying in class, like I did a presentation on Saturday for girls called Dream Girls Conference. And the organizer of the conference called me after it was over and she said, I don't really think you know how anointed you are. She said, my phone has been ringing off the hook. And she said, I had a 71-year-old woman called me, said she boohooed crying through your entire presentation because you spoke to the teenage girl in her. Y'all, this is so God. Like this is not me. And it's a weight sometimes because it's like, to whom much is given, much is required. And it's just so I appreciate, Kathy told me that she's asked you all to pray for me. Like, I really appreciate your prayers because there are times when I sit back and I'm like, God, wow, I can't believe that, like, I get to be the vessel for you to bring truth to so many kids who are out there. But the other thing is one of the questions said, in your talk, you mentioned that teen girls say they get it and they know why they should wait after years of being told that the Bible says no. What specifically are you telling them that makes girls get it? And so, like I said, I'm with teens for 3 hours, so I can't like share my entire, like because it's the whole 3-hour presentation. But I want to read you a letter that I got from a 9th grader. This girl is an amazing writer. And to me, very mature for a 9th grader. So that's what, 14, 15 years old. And she says, Miss Jackie, I wanted to start off by saying thank you. You coming to speak was exactly what I needed. I've grown up in a very Christian and religious home, and it's been wonderful. But going into high school, I set expectations, ones that normal people have. I quickly realized that my parents would simply not allow me to have that life. They would preach on abstinence and sex and how everything is better when waiting, but I felt like I would be missing out. I told myself I'd wait till marriage, but secretly knew that I wanted to do my own thing. I see people in happy relationships at each other's houses, having casual sex, and I felt like being a Christian held me back from having fun. And that's what I hear from a lot of Christian teens. Recently, a boy that I'm in marching band with has become important to me. We would call each other, but could hardly talk in person. Somehow on the bus rides to the competition, we ended up together, and each time it was more and more physical. It was normal stuff like cuddling, hugging, hands around the waist. It was the weekend after you came to speak, and all I could think about was how you said, if you don't do things with guys, you may lose a boyfriend that you really like, but you'll never lose a boyfriend who really likes you. I felt loved and special, but all of a sudden, all of the touching made me feel so alone and empty. I realized that no matter how good it felt, the instability and unknowing of what would happen to me and the boy made it feel worthless. And one of the things I talked to them about in the class is the fact that most of them are dating their future ex. I say, because when you date somebody, that relationship typically ends one of two ways. You either marry them or you break up with them. And I said, at your age, the chances are much, much greater that the person you're dating as a teenager will be your ex and they'll be your spouse. And I said, if you already know in the relationship that it's most likely temporary, why would you make a decision in a temporary relationship that could come with a permanent consequence? So let me get back to the letter. She says, I promised myself the next morning that I would never have casual sex, because although it wasn't sex, I realized how empty the physical is without the emotional. And that's the other thing I talk about a lot in the class is nobody talks about the emotional consequences. Everybody just talks about pregnancy mainly, and sometimes STDs. She says, I've always cared about boys' opinion of me. I've always felt special and craved for their validation. That's a huge issue, which is why when you said that the best guy won't pressure you and he can't feel the emotional need that you're looking for. And here's the deal. We have to get to the root cause. There's a quote that I like, and I'm sorry I'm jumping around, but I printed out this quote, and it says, beneath every behavior, there is a feeling. And beneath each feeling is a need. And when we meet that need, rather than focus on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause and not the symptom. And unfortunately, I think what we often do is we deal with symptoms. Like I heard a preacher preach a message once that he said, kill the spider. And he said, you know, if you have all these spider webs, and you can pull down spider webs like until the cows come home, as the country people say. He said, but the webs are going to keep coming back until you kill the spider. And so this is what this quote is saying. It's not my quote, it's by Ashley Warner. But I think that's one of the reasons why I have been so effective with the kids, is that I try to not just get to the cause myself, but I try to talk them into, what does sex really mean for you? Like, what is the real reason you want to have sex in this relationship? And it's typically to meet a need. And so let me get back to the girls' letter. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. She says, I've always cared about boys' opinion of me. I've always felt special and craved their attention. You said that he can't feel the emotional need that you're looking for. I was like, wow, I needed that. I needed to be reminded of how unwise it is to have sex too soon. The culture tells me that I'm crazy for waiting, that my sex life will be dry. The church tells me that I need self-control and that I must wait. And she puts must in all caps. I needed another voice of reason, one that I knew was right, but didn't feel forceful. Your stories of teen pregnancy and STDs reminded me that this whole time, I was so fixed on whether I could hide the fact that I'm having sex that I didn't even consider the huge consequences. I realized that the cons outweigh the pros. And when you chose to use the word wise, that really stood out to me. I'm not risking a teen pregnancy or STD feeling empty for what you said was only a temporary good feeling. Listening to you was my wake-up call. You were what I needed. I am waiting till marriage and I have no regrets. God bless you. Like, I read this letter and I'm like, God, like only you could have that kind of impact on these girls and the guys. Because I have similar letters from guys. And let me tell you what has surprised me so much is it is often easier for me to talk a teenage guy out of having sex than it is a girl. And that I never, ever expected that. And the other thing that surprised me. So I have written a book called 7 Secrets Guys Will Never Tell You, a teen girl's guide on love, sex, and relationships. And so much of what I teach the girls in the class, probably almost all of what I teach girls in class is inside this book. But the biggest shock that I had was how much this book started resonating with boys. Like, I'm telling guys secrets, and then guys started saying they wanted to buy the book. And so I read a section out of the book in every class, and it's from the introduction. I talk about the 3 types of guys that are out there. The first guy is the player, the one that like doesn't care about them. All he wants is sex. He's just using them. The second kind of, and I read the description and then I read a letter, because this book has over 100 letters from teenagers in it. And moms started buying this book for their sons because they said, I want my son to know that he doesn't have to have sex, because there's so much pressure on boys to think that they're almost more embarrassed about being a virgin than the girls are. But now I find girls who are embarrassed about being a virgin, which blew my mind. So then the second kind of guy is the good guy. And so I tell them, I say, the good guy is the guy who really does care about you. He's not using you. He may even ask for sex. I said, because I am not saying that just because a guy asks for sex, he's a bad guy. I said, but the difference is the good guy has been socialized by the same media that you've been socialized by. And he believes that this is what's expected in a relationship. And I said, but the difference is if you get somebody who's a good guy, once he gets the information, he'll stop having sex. And so then I read a letter from the book where a guy said, I was having sex with my girlfriend because I thought that I was showing her that I loved her. But when I heard you say that the best way to show somebody that you love them is by protecting them, it made me realize that I needed to stop having sex with my girlfriend because I want to protect her. And then I say, but the third kind of guy is the guy that most girls don't think exists. And that's the best guy. And I say the best guy is the guy who only wants what's best for himself and whoever he's dating. And this is the guy that even if you offered sex to him, he would turn it down. This is the guy who wants to treat you the same way he would want someone to treat his little sister as his future daughter. And so I read multiple letters from guys who said they turned sex down. And so I say the enemy of best is not bad. The enemy of best is good. the thing that keeps most people from getting the best that they can have in life is that they settle. Like, we become a society of settlers. And so what the thing that amazed me is I started getting letters from guys who said, I was a good guy because I didn't think the best guy was possible, but you've challenged me. And now I want to be the best guy. And I thought I was pretty good because I told my girlfriend I would wait till she was ready. But what you taught me was, if I wanted to be the best guy, even if she was ready, I would protect her, even when she wasn't really willing to protect herself. And so that has really shocked me. But that's another way that I've been able to get them to get it. Okay, so there were a ton of questions about LGBT. And so let me just tell you, I live and teach on a regular basis, where I go into classrooms in 2 very conservative counties. And like, even if I wanted to, we're not allowed to talk about LGBT issues in the classroom. And the only thing I can talk about is from the standpoint of the fact that you're still at risk of getting an STD regardless of what your sexual orientation is. So I don't have a lot of experience on talking about the LGBT issues, but and churches, unfortunately, don't let me come in very often at all. So I haven't had the opportunity to talk about it from a biblical standpoint, because, and that's what somebody said, how do you biblically talk about it and not offend the kid? And I'm like, well, churches won't let me come in because this is a taboo subject, unfortunately. But I will tell you that 2 weeks ago, I was at a middle school, with an 8th grade class that had a very large population of girls who identified as either bisexual, lesbian, pansexual, trans. And so I had a girl, 8th grade girl, who wanted to talk to me after class. So I ended up talking to this young lady for about 30 minutes. And she said, my parents are very conservative and very religious, and I'm trans, but I can't tell my parents. She said, I hear my dad all the time screaming at the television, talking about the F and LGBT community is destroying our country. And she said, I have to sit and listen to my dad scream all of these things about the LGBT community. And I feel like I'm so lonely. There's nobody in my family that I can talk to, because I'm so afraid my dad is going to disown me. And she said, so my biggest fear is I'm going to wait to have my surgery until after I become an adult. And then I feel like my dad's he's not going to recognize me anymore. And I mean, this girl was really, really, really torn about, what do I do? And she's like, I love my dad. And she's like, I mean, she was really torn. And so my recommendation to her was to write your dad a letter. I'm a big proponent of letters. And I said, write your dad a letter. And I said, that way he will have time to process what you just told him without reacting. And I said, you got to understand that I said, and you have to be willing to acknowledge that he may never agree with your lifestyle, but that does not mean that he will stop loving you. And it's so interesting that when the student left out of the room, the teacher started crying. And it was just the 3 of us were in the room, the teacher, myself, and the student. And the teacher started crying. And she said, you could have been having that conversation with my youngest daughter. She said, and she's just crying. And she's like, I'm a really strong Christian. My daughter just came to me and told me that she was pansexual. And she said, my husband didn't have the opportunity. She said, I wish my daughter had the opportunity to write my husband a letter. She said, because my husband walked in on us when we were both sitting in the floor, bawling, crying. She had just told me. And she said, my husband did not react well at all. And she said, he said some things to my daughter that he can never take back. And she said, my daughter is now in counseling to try to repair the relationship between her and her dad, because it was so, so, so bad. And so one of the things that I ask the students in the class is, I say, how would you parent differently? When you have kids, what would you do differently than how you're being parented? It's going to be a book one day, because I've just been blown away by their responses. It has been so insightful. And I've learned so much. And so whenever they say it, I know there's a backstory behind it, and I'll say, tell me more. And so one young lady said, I'm not going to be judgmental. I said, tell me more. And she said, I have to sit and listen to my mom talk about those girls who do those things whether it's watching porn, whether it's sending new pictures, whether it's having sex, or whether they got pregnant. And she said, so if I ever made that choice, my mom would be the last person I would tell. She said, because I know how she feels about girls who do that. And so I just think that that was huge for me, because I thought, I don't think the average parent understands that kids are reading so much into your behavior and what you say, not even about them, but what you say about their friends or what you say about other people. And so I think the best thing you can do is show compassion, even when you find out about somebody else who made a poor choice, because now you want your daughter or your son to be able to come and tell you if they ever made a choice. But if they think that you're going to judge them because of what they heard you say about other people, they'll never come and talk to you. So that's one thing that I always want to make sure that I tell parents is, as far as keeping the lines of communication open, it means a lot what they observe from you as far as your behavior. But back to the LBGT thing, there is Access Organization, the organization where I did the interview that you saw. They have an amazing resource for Christian parents about LGBT. I mean, if you're not familiar with them, please go to their website. They have tons of what they call parent books. They have over 100 parent books on every topic you could ever think of. And they right now, they used to be $3.99 for these little ebooks that they have. And now it sounds like all the ebooks, you can only get them by getting a membership to their membership. But it's $9.99 a month, and it's $99 a year. But you could like get a membership for $9.99, get the books that you want, and you can cancel. Don't tell them I told you that. So they have a book, and Kathy's going to send out in an email, because right now they're offering a free download for the book for parents on everything you need to know about LGBT. So I'm not going to answer any of those questions for two reasons. One, because all of the questions will be answered in that book. And number two, I just don't have a lot of experience having to talk to kids about it, because I can't talk to them in the classroom about it because it's not allowed, and churches don't let me come in.
Okay, Jackie, you got about 10 minutes.
Oh my goodness, no way.
You're going to have to come back.
Oh my goodness, no way. Shoot. Okay, so many of these questions that you ask, I have written blog posts about them. I have a free download on my website called 7 Things Every Parent of a Teen Needs to Know Before Having the Talk. If you go to my website and you download that, it'll sign you up for my blog as a subscriber. But there are also hundreds of articles that I've written, and so many of your questions were answered in the articles. And so here's what I'll do. For some of the ones that there are articles that I've written about them, I will send Kathy links to those, and you can go and read the articles. So like I have an article that I've written about what to do if you just found out your daughter had sex. So I've written an article about that. So I'll send her the link about that one, and that'll answer one of those questions. The other, but the interesting thing about that was the advice that I gave parents. So a mom sent me a message and said, I had started having sex at 15. I got pregnant in high school and I had an abortion. And then I got to college. I got in another relationship and I ended up having a second abortion in college. And she said, my daughter now thinks she wants to have sex. Should I tell her about my past? And so my response to the mom was, I think it's okay for you to tell your daughter about the fact that you were sexually active as a teenager, if you couch it under the, here are my regrets about that decision. I said, but I'm not sure at her age that she could handle the abortion, the knowledge of you having an abortion. And so I said, I'm not saying you would never tell her about that. I'm just not sure if 15 is the time. So I wrote that blog post. And then the next time I went to class, I asked the students and I said, hey, y'all, I need some advice. I said, this is what a mom asked me. What do you think she should do? Do you know that 90% of the students said that the mom should tell the daughter about the abortion? And I said, really? And I said, would you not judge your mom? Would you not think your mom was a hypocrite? And so the students were like, now there were a couple of girls who said things like, I would be upset because I'm an only child. And if I knew that my mom had an abortion, it means I could have some siblings. And so that would make her upset. But most of the kids said, no, it would make my mom look human to me. And it would give me more compassion for my mom. And it would make me realize that that she's not just telling me things because she's just trying to ruin my life, but she's telling me from experience. And so that was a real shock for me, that 90% of guys and girls said that they thought the mom should tell the teen everything. Who knew? So I don't always give the best advice, obviously.
Hey, Jackie, I'm going to jump in real quick. We had like, I don't even know how many moms say, can we give her more time? We'll skip with some small group time. So we're going to give you more time if you have more time.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Y'all.
We love you.
I appreciate the extra time. That's always my biggest issue, is whenever somebody gives me a short period of time, I'm like, oh, this is going to be so hard. So anyway, I'll send the link. So that one, there's a thing called, can you tell your teen to abstain if you didn't? I wrote another blog post about that because somebody asked that question. And this is what I tell moms. I said, when you tell your child, don't, because I've had moms say, especially moms who are teen moms, they really don't feel like they have the right to tell their child not to have sex as a teenager, because they're like, she knows I had sex as a teenager because I had her when I was a teenager. And I feel like a hypocrite. And I say, when you tell your child, don't do as I do, that's a hypocrite. When you tell your child, don't do as I did, that's a teacher. And I said, if you allowed every poor choice that you ever made in the past to handicap you from having that conversation with your child, there probably are a lot of things you probably shouldn't talk to them about, right? But I don't know why, when it comes to sex, that's the only choice. It just seems like that parents feel like I'm not qualified to tell them to do something different than what I did. So I have a blog post out there about that. But I also have an e-course on my website called How to Have the Tough Conversations. And that's one of the conversations that's included in there. One conversation is about rape or molestation. That is something that has blown my mind. And when I think about kids who are medicating pain, I have girls crying in my class all the time. I mean, and it's hard for me to keep teaching when I see a kid fighting back tears or crying or having to get up and leave the class. I was in an 8th grade class and I was talking about rape and molestation, and the 3 girls had to go out because they were crying. And then I get letters from all these 8th grade girls who said there are a lot of girls who had things happen to them in the past, and now they're finally going to tell their parents, because most of it's not getting reported. And so when I talk about like rape and molestation, or I talk about daddy issues, like that's another one that really brings tears to the eyes of kids. So that's the whole getting to the medication of pain part. Let me see another question. Oh, pornography. How do you talk about, what do you do if you discover that your teen is viewing pornography or masturbating? I did a 3-part series on my blog post about porn. Is your child at risk? A youth pastor's experience with porn. Not his experience, but a parent coming to him. And 3 top mistakes that parents make with their child in porn. So I'll put those links in the email that Kathy will send out. But this is the thing. This is how I get kids to get the whole porn thing. First of all, I show a video clip of a doctor talking about, it was on the Katie Couric show, a doctor talking about there's something called porn-related erectile dysfunction. And so now you have teenage college-age boys who cannot get aroused in a real relationship because they've been so used to watching porn and masturbating that nobody can do them like they can do them. And let me tell you, that gets the boys' attention in the class. So I start to get a lot of letters from guys saying, I'm going to stop watching porn. But the other thing I talk about is the fact that I have tons of stories, and stories are very effective, but I also have tons of letters. I told you I've received over 17,000 letters. And so I read a lot of letters to the students. And I talk about the fact that I talked to a radio disc jockey, and he said that when he stopped watching porn in his 40s as a married man, he said what made him stop watching porn was that he interviewed a former porn star. And I'm sharing this with the class. And I said, he said that the first thing was when the former porn star told him how painful some of the things were that they had to do, some of the acts they had to do, but they had to act like they were enjoying it for entertainment. It can't look like it's painful. When they told them that they couldn't have safe sex, they couldn't even wear a condom because the producer said it's not going to look appealing if you stop to put on a condom. But I said the third thing that he said really got him was when the former porn star told him how many women were there against their will because they had been sex trafficked. And I said, he said, that means I am contributing to the sex trafficking industry. And I cannot in good conscience continue to watch something that for my own enjoyment, especially when I have a wife at home, like it's not even necessary. And I know that this is coming at somebody else's expense. And so I share that with them in the class. And then I start getting letters from boys. And you would not believe how many girls have told me they're addicted to porn. It is not just a guy thing. I start getting letters saying, I'm going to stop watching porn. And I've had tons of conversations with students after class about, what do I do? I've been, how do I get rid of this addiction? That's a whole nother conversation. How do you respond if you discover that your teen is sexting or sent or requesting nude pictures to a peer or a boyfriend or girlfriend? I wrote a blog post. It sounds like I wrote a blog post on everything, doesn't it? So I have one that I'll put in the link. It's called, Are You Out of Touch with Your Daughter's Tech Life? And here's the deal. When I first started writing blogs in 2012, I wrote blogs about guys and girls. Well, then in about 2015, 2016, I hired somebody to help me with marketing, and they said, you got to pick an audience. Like, you can't talk to everybody. You gotta get an avatar. And so they said, even though you are effective with boys in the classroom, like, you need to start writing to moms of teen girls. So in the last 4 or 5 years, all of my blog posts have been for moms of teen girls. Although I have some dads who subscribe to my blog, I always write them to moms of teen girls. So I did a masterclass in the spring after schools closed down. I did a masterclass on my book, and it's called 7 Secrets Revealed. And so it was 8 sessions on a Monday and Thursday night for 4 weeks. We went through my book, a chapter every night. I had girls from 13 states in the United Kingdom who joined. The one from the United Kingdom stayed up to 1 o'clock in the morning. I was like, that's deep. But anyway, so after I did that, the mom started saying, I have a son. I need my son to hear this too. And so in November, I did a masterclass for boys called Boys to Men Masterclass, and it was 4 sessions. So I have started to do more stuff for teen boys, and I'm actually in the process of writing 2 more books, one for girls and one for guys. But most of my content is for girls. But I have moms of boys who are subscribed to my blog, and they often send me emails and say, even though you write about girls, much of what you write about, I can take and apply it to my son as well. But anyway, I did a blog post about that, about your daughter's tech life. And I have the advantage of being able to reach kids in this area just because I have so many letters that I share with them in the class about girls and guys who've had regrets from sending nude pictures, and so many stories. So I get tons of letters saying, I'm never going to do that again. Like, you made me realize, besides the fact that it's illegal. I mean, we always talk about that as well. But let me tell you another strategy that I use that is effective. So periodically, and I don't do this often just because I don't have the bandwidth to do it, but periodically, moms will pay me to talk to their daughters if their daughters are in a really tough spot. And this is how I am effective at it, is because I never make it about the daughter. And I've been doing this long enough that I have enough stories and letters that if the mom tells me that her daughter is sexting, I just, in conversation while I'm talking to the daughter, I share a story about a girl, or I share a letter. And so I think you can use that as well. A lot of moms tell me that they use my blog post to have conversations as conversation starters. That, I posted something on Instagram the other day, and a mom commented under it, and she said, my daughter and I had a really good talk about, this is a great conversation starter on the way to school this morning with my daughter. And so use things like that. And it doesn't have to be my stuff, but I just think it's really effective if you can make a conversation about the issue, not about your daughter, that you're discussing somebody else's. Like, a dad called me one day frantic because his stepdaughter, he had found some stuff on his stepdaughter's cell phone. No, he had gone through her diary. I don't recommend that. But anyway, he had gone through her diary, and he had seen some things about things she was doing and planning to do. And so he called me frantic. She's 14. And he's like, I got to come get your book. He drove to my house and picked up the book. And a month later, he emailed me and said, my daughter and I read a chapter of your book every night. And he said, it started out, she didn't really want to do it. He said, by the 3rd chapter, She was coming home from school saying, time for our chapter. And he said, I never had to confront her about what I read in her diary, because everything that I read in her diary, it was covered in your book. And so it's the whole, you're able to approach them without it being about them, and it's not so confrontational. So if you can find any kind of examples as conversation starters, if you're having an issue, especially if you find out about something that they're doing, a bad choice they're making, and you don't want them to know that you found out that they were doing it because you might have gotten it by reading a diary or something like that. Just find some other way to bring it up, and they'll receive it a lot more. Because here's the thing, some of the girls and guys in the class, they don't even recognize the errors of their ways until they read a letter on the screen that I'm showing about somebody else who's doing the same thing. And they say, when you read that letter, it sounded so stupid. That girl sounded so stupid who was doing that. And then I realized I do the same thing. But it's like, I got it now, because it wasn't me, but it was her, but I saw myself in that story. Okay, back to the questions. Okay, Kathy, how am I doing? Do you want to open up anybody to ask me a question, like in person, or you want me to just stick with these?
Just stick with those. You got a lot of good, you had like 20 something of them there.
Yeah, I got a lot. Okay, somebody said, if your teen has never dated and could be a while given the pandemic, how much should we discuss now with them, given that they are not currently in the situation? So I did a blog post called "When's the Best Time to Have the Talk" on September 2018. But I would say, if you wait until they're dating, if you wait until they need it, you're probably waiting too late, because now their emotions are involved. So you want to have a conversation with them when they are not in a relationship, so that they can get all of these skills and tools, and they can understand it when it's not about them. Once they get in a relationship, the conversation is about them, and they're feeling personally attacked, and they're thinking you just don't like the person they're dating, or you just won't want this. So that's the worst time. And I'll tell you, I had a young lady send me a message on Instagram, and she said, could you, because I had said, if anybody has any questions, let me know and I'll do a video on it. And so she sent a question and said, how do you move on after you've messed up? And so I recorded a video and I sent it back to her. And I in a direct message, I said, I'm not sure if this came across your news feed, but I answered your question. And so she told me she got pregnant when she was 12 years old. She was at a Christian school. Her mom had no idea she was dating. She was in the 7th grade. The boyfriend was also at the Christian school. He was in the 9th grade. It was a smaller Christian school, so everybody's in the same building or on the same campus. She's in one building, they're in the next one. And she ends up, her parents were divorced. She was an only child. The boy says to her after, I want to spend time with you outside of school, but we wouldn't have any privacy if it was at my house. What's your situation at your house? She said, my parents are divorced. My mom doesn't get home from work until about 6 o'clock at night. They get out of school at 2:30. He gets his older brother, drop her off. They have sex. She gets pregnant. She's 12. And I said, so your mom never, I said, you had started your menstrual cycle? And she said, yeah, I started my menstrual cycle when I was 11. And I said, well, when you started your menstrual cycle at 11, did your mom not have a conversation with you about, like, what does this mean? And now that she said, no, she says, the only thing my mom ever said was just in passing a couple times in the car. She's like, when you get older, you don't want to have sex because you could get pregnant and it could ruin the rest of your life. She's like, that's the only conversation my mom and I ever had. And she said, and I said, so like when you had, she didn't really want to have sex, but she felt like if I don't have sex with him, he's going to think I'm a kid. Which is why I warn girls about dating older guys, because that's typically what happens is you don't want to seem like a kid and you do things. And so I said, so you didn't use any kind of protection? And she said, I thought I was too young to get pregnant. She thought you had to be 14 to get pregnant. She said, every girl that I'd ever known that got pregnant, they were all 14. So her mom never had a conversation with her. But her mom did not even know she had a boyfriend. And she said, I knew if my mom knew I had a boyfriend, she would not have let me date him. So her mom is thinking she's only 12. I don't need to have a conversation with her because she's only 12. and she's not dating. So that's the issue with waiting until they start dating to have, that's another issue with waiting until they start dating to have the conversation. Okay, how do you get your kids to engage in a conversation about sex when they are hesitant to talk? They're resistant to talking about it, or they say they're embarrassed and they don't want to talk about it. So I asked the kids, I said, how many of you have had sex talk with your parents? And about half the class will say yes, the other class, half will say no. And I say, well, how was it like? They all say awkward. And I'll say, what makes it awkward? They'll say, because it's your parents. They're like, I said, well, is there anything they can do that will make it less awkward? And they're like, not really. Like, they're just your parents. They're like, it's just awkward. But I do think that if you start at a young age having conversations about respecting themselves, about valuing themselves, about healthy relationships, then it doesn't have to be this big sex talk. Now, I do think you have to have a conversation at some point about the consequences and what could happen. But I always say, I like to teach towards something and not away from something. And so we've always tried to change teenage behavior for years using two words, do and get. So we always talked about consequences. And I think a better way to change their behavior is to talk about benefit. I mean, use two different words, see and feel. How do you see yourself? How do you feel about yourself? Because until they see and feel about themselves the way they should, they're going to make all kind of poor decisions. And so talk about healthy relationships, use the media to start conversations. I mean, if you watch any kind of media with them, you'll have plenty of conversations to talk, ways to talk about, okay, let's talk about what happened there. Do you think that girl was respecting herself? Do you think that guy was being respectful to her? Let's talk about that. So sometimes it's just, I mean, you think about if you had it with your parents, and you're probably not, if you're like me, like our generation, there was no talk. But if there had been a talk, it probably would have been awkward for you just because it's your parents. But I also say, like, use resources. Like, I have a ton of videos on YouTube. I have a ton of videos on Instagram. It's so funny. I have this one mom. I've never met this mom, but almost every video that I put on Instagram, she tags her daughter in it. And I'm like, her daughter's probably saying, Mom. I just always think it's so funny. She's like, I hope she's listening. And I'm like, well, you've given her plenty of information and material. Okay, I talked about this and how do you respond? Oh, the whole birth control. If our kids tell us that we discover that they're in a dating relationship and they plan to have sex or they're having sex, how do we talk about birth control after reiterating our convictions and hope for them to abstain from sex until marriage because of God's design? If they insist that they are going to have sex, do we take them to get birth control? So I have a blog post called Birth Control is Not Disease Control. But here's the thing. This is a tough one for me to answer because this really is a parent's choice. I just think that parents need to understand just that birth control is not disease control. And teens need to understand that birth control is not disease control. And I'll tell you, I had a young lady who I was speaking for the National Girl Scouts Conference, and a girl came up to me and she said, now in this situation, the mom was going to take her to put her on birth control just because she was dating, and her mom just wanted that as a precaution. And so the girl said to me, my boyfriend and I have already had a conversation about the fact that we don't want to have sex. And she said, I feel like if my mom puts me on birth control, it's going to make it too easy. She's like, it's going to be harder for me to say no to my boyfriend when he knows I'm taking birth control pills if he ever changes his mind and he decides that he wants to have sex. She said, and so I don't think that mom knew that what she was doing by telling the daughter that I'm going to put you on birth control. It's not that I don't trust you. It's just that I just want to make sure. What she's saying to her daughter is, I don't want you to have sex, but I don't think you have enough discipline and self-control to not have sex. And even if I just think moms always ask me, should I take my daughter if she asked me? I would just hate to be the one to prevent a pregnancy, but yet because the girl was on birth control, because girls who take birth controls are less likely to require that the guy use a condom. And birth control is not disease control. And even though a condom is not 100% effective against every STD, like at least it provides some protection. And so I think oftentimes when girls get on birth control, they're less likely to require the condom, and then they increase their chance to possibly getting an STD. And you know what? You can survive a pregnancy. I mean, it might change the girl's life, but some of these STDs you can't survive. I mean, you get the HPV that causes cervical cancer, or you get one that's they'll have the rest of their life, like herpes. I just think that's a tough place to be in. And I don't know that I would take my daughter. I would give her all the information. The reality is, in our country, like, they could go to a health department and get it, like, without you taking them. I don't know. I don't want to judge a mom who does it, though, because, like, that's not my daughter, and people have different reasons for doing different things. And I also have the experience of, like, 19 years of talking to teens about this topic and hearing all the stories. And so that puts me in a different place, because I just see girls' faces who are, they didn't get pregnant or they didn't get an STD, but the emotional consequences are devastated. And they're devastating. And they try to commit suicide because of the emotional consequences. And I always tell the girls, I say, where's the condom that protects the heart? I say, where's that vaccine? I said, they haven't invented it yet. Let me see what other questions I have. Oh, okay, I'd already answered that one. I had a third page with it. Oh, okay, here it is. So what do you see and recommend as boundaries to hold our kids around dating at various ages and stages of maturity? What kind of expectations and rules should we hold for our kids in our home and outside of our home with their boyfriend or girlfriend? How do these rules change as the kids get older? What about at age 18 or 19? One example is a couple being in our son and daughter's bedroom or in the basement. Another example is being home alone. Another is showing affection with boyfriend or girlfriend around others, including our family. I think parents have to protect kids from themselves oftentimes. And even when you might think that your child would never do anything if they're in a room with the opposite sex and they're, I trust my child. Many times your child can't even trust themselves just because they're human. And it says nothing negative about your child. It's just that, like, given the right situation, like, I remember a male teacher who said in one of my classes, he said, and I was talking to all 8th grade girls, and he happened to be the teacher, that he was a guy, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, here's what these girls don't understand. He said, I was a teenage boy. And he said, I don't care how Christian a boy is. I don't care. He said, you put them in the right environment, in the right situation. He said, they are fighting a battle that it is very difficult. And so the time to demonstrate self-control is not in the bedroom. This is what I tell the kids. The time to demonstrate self-control is to keep you out of the bedroom. Like, you have to have the boundaries that keeps you from being that close to the fire. And everybody thinks, I said, the biggest mistake teenagers make is to believe that they'll be able to stop things after they get started and before they go too far. So I just think parents, you have a right. My mom used to say, if she saw, like, teenage couples, like, really all over each other in public, and she would always say, if they're that comfortable with each other in public, I can only imagine what they're doing in private. So, and I kind of, when I see couples, I kind of, in my head, I kind of judge them too. I'm like, y'all a little bit too touchy-feely right there. And if you're doing that in public, like, because once they get so comfortable, like, it just gets to the point. One of the guys that I interviewed I interviewed him for my Boys to Men masterclass and for my girls masterclass. He was a teen dad. He was in my class at one of my classes, and he came to me after the class. He was a senior. He had gotten his girlfriend pregnant as a junior, and he came to me after my classes and said, I want to, because I talk about the fact that how one person can change the culture, and it all starts with one person. He said, I want to be a part of the change, and I want to share my story. And he said, because when I found out I was a teen dad, there were no resources out there for teen dads. All the resources were for teen moms. And so I ended up interviewing him. And so the girls in my masterclass, and ironically, The girlfriend was the one who pressured him to have sex. He didn't want to have sex. She was the one who pressured. That is the biggest change I've seen in 19 years. Girls are so much more aggressive. And so now I have guys who are bringing girlfriends to me after class for me to convince the girlfriend why they want to stop having sex. Because they say, I know what she's going to think. She's going to think I'm cheating. She's going to think I don't find her attractive anymore. And that's what girls say. Because they place their value in the sex. And so one of the things the teen dad said was, because I said, what could you have done to prevent this pregnancy from happening? And he said, we got too comfortable with each other. He said, we didn't keep our boundaries. And he said, we were talking every day after school. We were talking at 11, 12 o'clock at night. And he said, once we got so comfortable with each other, our boundaries just started to go back farther and farther and farther and farther. And he said, and so they ended up having sex. So I just think we have to help them even when they don't realize they need our help. How am I doing with time, Kathy?
Can you do a couple more? We'll see how you do with that. Is that good?
Okay. How and at what age do you talk to our kids about consent regarding any kind of physical activity, from holding hands to kissing to sex and to everything in between? You know, you would not believe how many students, boys and girls, have told me they got molested when they were younger. I mean, toddlers. I mean, for elementary school. So I think the conversation about consent, you know, we always heard this good touch, bad touch, like that has to happen, but it has to be like, and they're told by the perpetrator, if you tell, you're going to get in trouble. If you tell, they're not going to believe you. If you tell, I'm going to hurt you or hurt your family. You got to have those kind of conversations. But even in situations of relationships, the one thing that I talk about in the book, I have a whole section in the book about respect and how do you tell when somebody respects you? And I say, if they don't respect your decisions, they don't respect you. And it's not just the decision to have sex. I said, it starts way back. If they want to hold hands and you don't want to hold their hand and they pressure you to do it, they don't respect you. Because when somebody respects you, they respect every decision that you make. If they're trying to kiss you and you don't want to kiss them and they pressure you and they keep saying, they don't respect you. And I say, trust me, if they don't respect you back here where it's holding hands and kissing, don't think they're going to respect you anymore when it gets to the point of them wanting to have sex with you and their hormones are even more elevated. And that goes for guys and girls, because like I said, girls are pressuring guys to have sex just like guys are pressuring girls.
You did that one really fast. You can do a couple more.
Okay, I did that one. Oh, these two are kind of related. How do you approach talking about the positives of marriage and sexual activity when if our marriage is a poor example of a healthy or thriving relationship due to divorce or separation or infidelity or addiction or lack of physical affection or differences in faith, maturity, or unhealthy boundaries of various kids? That's a very good question. And here's the thing. I tell students, you can learn from people who did things right, and you can learn from people who did things wrong. And I've had students tell me in class that they don't want to get married because of what happened in their family. I've had kids in class say, I don't believe in marriage. And what I tell them is, don't give up on the institution of marriage just because you have not seen it work in your personal life. And I say, when your parents got married, they did not have the opportunity to have healthy relationship education like you're getting in class. And so they did not know all the things that you are learning right now. And I said, the best thing that you can do is put yourself in a position where you will go through some things that your parents may not have gone through initially, as far as a relationship, like what's a healthy, what's unhealthy, what to accept, what not to accept, what are the signs up front that this isn't somebody, and you just make sure you do it so you can decrease the chances. And I'm not saying that it won't happen, but you can decrease the chances some if you put the work in up front. And I said, you have an advantage at your age because things are different from that standpoint. They were not teaching classes like this in high school when your parents came along. And so I think, that, and then I talked to them about that there are studies that show that the divorce rate is lower for people who didn't have sex before they got married. And that doesn't mean that if you don't have sex before you get married, you won't get divorced. But the studies just show that you increase your chances. And I said, here's one way you can decrease your chance that you'll get divorced is, I said, by not having all of this baggage that you take into a marriage because of the relationships that you've been in as a teenager. And I say, the younger you start dating, the more baggage you're going to have. You're going to have trust issues because you got broken up with. You're going to, you could have all of this baggage. And I said, here's what happens. Like every time you date and you break up, like you're ripping this thing apart. You date, you bond, you have sex, you break up, you rip it apart. You date, you have sex, you bond, you break up, you rip it apart. And I said, you know what you're doing? You're practicing mini divorces. And I said, so by the time you get married, it's going to be much easier for you to break up because you've had so much practice while you were a teenager, dating, breaking up, dating, breaking up, dating, breaking up. I'm like, there's some things you can do right now to decrease your chances. Don't just give up on the institution of marriage. So as a parent, you can have conversations. You can have conversations with them about things that you maybe wish you had seen as far as signs before you got married that maybe you would not have married that person if you had looked for those choices or look for those behaviors or look for those things. So there are all kinds of ways you can have a conversation in a teachable way about your relationship, even if it's not a good relationship, that can educate your kids, because kids can learn from the ways you do things right, but also the ways you do things wrong. Okay, and this was kind of the same. What are the benefits of abstaining from marriage that we can highlight for our kids? Oh, darn it. So this is in my book as well. So one of the things I ask, especially when I do it in high school and 8th grade classes, is I say, what do teens expect from sex? And I separate. I ask the girls, they say love, commitment, validation. It'll make them feel pretty. It'll make them feel special. It'll increase their self-esteem. They have this long list of what they expect from sex. And then I ask the guys, I say, okay, guys, what do guys expect from sex? And they say pleasure, we're done. Sometimes they'll say respect or bragging rights, and girls will say respect, but girls want respect from their partner. Guys want respect from their peers. And so then I'll say, so do y'all notice anything different about these lists? And the guys will say, yeah, girls expect too much. And then the girls say, well, maybe the guys expect too little. And I say, guess what, girls? I agree with the guys. And they're like, what? And I say, yeah. I said, you know why I agree with the guys? I said, because what y'all just put on this list, it's not realistic. I said, it is unrealistic for a teenage girl to expect long-term emotional needs to be met by a short-term physical act. Not realistic. And I say, there's nothing wrong with anything on this list. There's nothing wrong with you wanting love. There's nothing wrong with you wanting commitment. There's nothing wrong with you wanting, I said, but it's just crazy to expect it from sex. And so I said, let me tell you why they say married people have the best sex. I said, this is not a married woman's list.
I don't want anyone to hit their head on it because Dad and Carter and Kate.
I say a married woman is not having sex with her husband in order to get love. A married woman's not having sex with her husband in order to get a commitment. A married woman's not having sex with her husband in order to get, I said, so inside of marriage, they can both focus on the same thing, which is pleasure. And I said, so that's one of the ways that I help them understand about marriage. But like I said, most of the things that I talk in class, they're either in my book or I have a DVD for girls called The Sex Talk Every Teen Girl Needs to Hear. I have one for guys, The Sex Talk Every Teen Guy Needs to Hear. Both of those presentations were assemblies. And so I don't get into as much detail as I do in the classroom because they're 1 hour instead of 3 hours. But I also have a DVD for parents called The Sex Talk Every Parent Needs to Have. And so it talks about what's going on in our culture. It talks about showing love language. It talks about all the ways I'm effective and what kids say that parents say that aren't effective. The thing that I'm actually in the process of doing a course for parents called 10 Ways to Raise a Daughter Who's Fab. That's focused, authentic, and brave. And it's going to be 10 videos and And each one of the videos is going to have 3 specific tasks. I mean, things that you can do that are practical that help your daughter become, because one of the biggest issues for girls is low self-esteem, low confidence, and wanting validation through a relationship. The master class that I have is 8 hours of content. So those girls are getting like, not just me for 3 hours like the kids get, but 8 hours. And in that master class, I interviewed 15 people. So there were 3 couples that didn't have sex until they got married. And I wanted every girl to have somebody that she could relate to. So I have a couple that they were both virgins when they got married. I have another couple where the girl was a virgin, the guy wasn't. And I have a third couple that neither one of them was a virgin, but they dated for 2.5 years and had sex for the first time on their wedding night. The other couple dated for 2.5 years, they had sex on their wedding night. And then the couple that was a virgin, I don't know, I think they dated for a year and then they got married. I have a girl who was a teen mom, so they get to hear that story. I have a girl who's a teen dad. A guy who's a teen dad. I have a guy, Jonah, who was a youth pastor. He was a pastor's son, and he talks to them about, and he said he wasn't sexually active, but he said for him, his goal was, he said they called him the puppet master in high school because his goal was to get girls emotionally attached to him and then leave them. And he said the reason was because he was insecure. He was like, I wasn't the tallest, I wasn't the best looking, I had insecurities. And so I wanted to prove to the guys that I could still pull in the girls, even though I wasn't an athlete, even though I wasn't good looking, that I wasn't tall. And he's like, I did that all through high school. He said, I realized now I was the biggest jerk that there was. But the secret that he talked about was they'll tell you what you want to hear, because that's one of the 7 secrets. The 7 secrets in my book, I'll tell you the secrets. The first one is sex doesn't equal love. The second one is they'll tell you what you want to hear. The third one is they're not looking for a wife. It talks about how girls think about marriage long before guys do. The fourth one is they won't respect you if you don't respect you. So I have a 16-year-old guy who talks about that one, and another college student who's a virgin, a guy who talks about why he doesn't want to have sex. I wrote the book and I forget my secrets. Okay, sex doesn't equal love. They'll tell you what you want to hear. They won't respect you if you don't respect you. Sex changes things. That was a big one. They're not looking for a wife. They can't replace your father, and they will wait if you will. And so there's a young lady that I interviewed who's 30 years old, and she's a virgin. She's a dermatologist. She was in my class when she was in high school, and I started mentoring her. She tells about, how when she was in college, she's a Christian, but all the other Christian kids who were having sex were telling her how crazy she was for not having sex. God will forgive you, yada, yada, yada. And how most of them have come back to her since then and with their regrets and said, I wish I had done what you did. So anyway, so that's the masterclass. That's another resource. I have another resource out there. It's an e-course called Dating Boundaries 101. And I talk about why they need to set boundaries, why their parents have boundaries. I talk about people boundaries, places boundaries, physical boundaries, and media boundaries. And then what to do if your boundaries aren't being respected. And then the masterclass that I did for boys, that's 4 hours. And I interviewed, we had a whole thing about pornography. Pornography and sex laws. We talked about consent, statutory rape, all of that was one session. One session was about manhood. Another session was about the regrets, and we talked about those were the negatives. And then the last session was the benefits of abstaining. And they had interviews with all guys who had abstained from sex, either until they got married or one who's engaged and he's a virgin. But anyway, that masterclass, I have to re-record it because the platform that I used was janky and the audio and video was out of sync. And so I just can't put it out there like that because it's not the quality that I want to represent me. So that one I'm on the process of relaunching. But anyway, those are resources that I have that, how did I do as far as times?
You did amazing. And I'm going to be sending out the links to your website, so everybody, because I'm going to probably buy every single book you just talked about in DVD and and we love you. I mean, we can't thank you enough, Jackie. We could listen to you for hours. So I do hope, you come back another time and you and I'll connect and I'll get all that information to share with our moms. And I know they're all thanking you in the chat. And I'm going to hand it off to Jane so she can wrap up. Did you want to pray us out, Jackie, before Jane comes on?
Sure.
Thank
And
you.
then while Jane's talking, I'll read the chat because I
Awesome.
haven't been able to look at the chat.
Okay.
Okay. God, we thank you for every mom that is on the call today. You said in your word that where 2 or 3 are gathered together in your name, that you would be in the midst. So I thank you for being in the midst of this Zoom call today. I thank you for giving the moms the wisdom that they need to communicate truth to their kids in the area of their sexuality. I thank you for calming any anxieties that they have about possibly messing up. Let them know that they are not responsible for success, but they're only responsible for obedience. I lift them up, and I just ask that even the moms who are watching the replay, God, who weren't able to be here in person, I include them in the midst as well. I thank you for covering their teens with your love and protecting them, even if they seem to be going astray and not making the right decisions. Let their teen sons and daughters know that your way is always the best way. I thank you for the divine meeting with this group so that you would allow me to just speak into their lives and help a generation of kids live life your way. Thank you so much, God, for every blessing that you have given us. And we just love you, and we honor you, and we praise you, and we will always give your name the praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Jackie, that was amazing. And I know that I speak for everyone, but I feel like words are inadequate really to express the depth of our gratitude that you would bless us with your time this way and your expertise. And yeah, it's just, I'm like all fired up with all these ideas that you've given us and resources. It's a little overwhelming, but overwhelming in such a like empowered kind of way. And I just thank you from all of us, from the bottom of our hearts, for being obedient to God, and just allowing him to use you in this way. It is powerful. And
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Super grateful. Super, super grateful. Okay. We have very little in the way of announcements. Just wanted to remind everybody that next week Moms with Teens is on spring break. So apologies if your kid's school is not on spring break next week, but it couldn't be avoided. In this area, we have, different spring breaks going on. So feel free to get together with your small group in another way, or even maybe you just want to reach out to one or, someone in your small group. Be creative. See where God leads you in connection on our week off. And remember that you always have all the videos and resources from our previous classes if you need to catch up with the extra time. Okay, so next week we're on a week off, and then the following week when we return on April 1st, we are so excited that we're going to hear from our own Moms with Teens small group leader, Cassie Hayes. She's going to be sharing about moms, teens, and self-awareness. So we're looking forward to that. But again, thank you so much, Jackie. We love you. We're praying for you and your ministry. And thank you, moms, for being with us this morning and being a part of our community. Enjoy your time in small groups, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.